For USM database systems class, for phase 2, I'll be go ahead and showcasing a family recipe cookbook of myself database in SQLite.
The code from us, you'll see one folder that'll say bean. This is the database of all my family's recipes. And in this folder, we have insertions, which has all of the records to insert in the database. We have queries, which is all the queries to showcase for today. And then table, which is how our database is made up. Then lastly, there'll be a Python program to load the data. And then that is pretty much it. So if I click on table.sql to explain how our database works is we have a table recipe, which holds the name of the recipe, description, and then it might hold an image. And then we have cooking steps, which is the steps that you take to cook a recipe. So for this is we have an ID, and then we have the recipe ID to link back to the recipe. We have step order, which links to the next order. So the first one's going to be null, and then the second one's going to point to the first one, and the third one's going to point to the second one in the database. So it's going to make a linked list inside of the table. And then instruction is like the actual instruction of what you need to do for the cooking steps. Then we have ingredient. Ingredient has a recipe ID to link the ingredient to the recipe. We have an amount, which is like 1, 2, 1 half, 1.5, whatever metric you want to use. We have unit. This could be like teaspoons, tablespoons, cups, ounces. We have ingredient, which is like the name of the ingredient. So carrot, salt, pepper, cinnamon, butter. And then prep method is in case something needs to happen with that ingredient. So like carrots could be diced, they could be chopped. And then we have person, which is just a person is a person, which has a first name, middle name, and last name. And then for family relation, we have a from person and to person. So from one person to another person, they're gonna have a relationship, whether that's sibling, brother, mother, friend, uncle, aunt. You can put whatever you want for the relation. It could be stepmother too. And then we have recipe to person. So this will link the author of the recipe with the person. And so you have the recipe ID of the recipe and then the person ID of the person. And then we have children to parent, which is the children ID of the person and then the parent ID of the person. So example is my father would be parent ID and I would be the child ID. And then on this database too, we have the foreign keys to link to the different records. And then we also have an on delete for the person ID in case you decide to delete the person from the database. Next is I'm going to show you how to actually load this data to create it. First things first is if I go into here, there's one dependency that you have to have. So I'm gonna go ahead and type out pi because that's what's pointing to Python 3. And I'm gonna go ahead and install that package. Well, that gets here. And in this program, we have the name of the database file. Uh, it'll remove the database first, and then it'll add the tables, and then it'll insert all the records that you need. So now that this is done, I'm gonna go ahead and do pi clone family recipe.py. And once that's done, you'll go ahead and create a database file right here and insert all these records. All these are recipes, family relations, all that from me, Owen Bean. And so now the next thing I'm going to go ahead and showcase is the database browser. I'm going to go ahead and open up that data. Oh, there we go. There we go. And there's all of our tables that are inserted. We also have a sequence too with the IDs. And then we, of course, we can just browse data if we want. There's cooking steps, family relations, persons, recipes, recipe to person. All right, and now I'm gonna go ahead and go step by step of some different things that you can query for. And I'm gonna do this specifically for my family because this is what I inputted for the data. So the first one I want to showcase is there's a running joke that I have with my stepmother, Erin, where I'm like, ew, it has butter, or why do you put butter in there? And so this first query, what it's going to do is it's going to get every single recipe that was made by my stepmother, which is Erin, and is going to find all the recipes that include butter on top of that. So it's going to be from my stepmother, Erin, and it's going to include butter as ingredient. So I'm going to copy this, go ahead, paste it in there, and execute it. So now we got three recipes. We have mashed potatoes, shepherd's pie, and peanut butter cheesecake are all made from my stepmother that include butter. Now, the next query is going to be just querying for recipes with just cinnamon. So in this one, nope, wrong one. In this one right here, cinnamon, we're going to look for cinnamon, and then we're going to get the recipe ID and get the name and the ID of that. So I'm going to go ahead and copy, whoops, copy, paste. And there are two recipes with cinnamon, pumpkin pie, which I remember is from my mother, and then French toast, which is from my grandmother on my mom's side. And so the next query I want to showcase is, let's say that we ran out of salt, and I don't really want to go to the store to get salt, or I have a friend that wants to have something with cinnamon, but he can't have any salt. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this query, which will look for recipes with cinnamon but no salt. And so when I paste this in search, pumpkin pie went away, so that means that there must have been salt in that recipe, but French toast stayed, so there's no salt. Alright, now the next one, let's say that you need to look for recipes in general. This one right here is going to look for recipes with bean, whether that's in the name, recipe description, or in as an ingredient itself. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and paste, and we'll go ahead and look. And it looks like there are two records in my family recipe book that has bean into it. One of it is green bean casserole, and then the other one is just turkey, which my father, David Bean, makes Thanksgiving turkey every year. So there's the two records. So just out of curiosity then, like let's say, ooh, green bean casserole, I'm kind of interested in that. Who made that? It's a great question. So if I go over to query green bean casserole author, gonna go ahead and look for a recipe name green bean casserole and then find the person recipe to person with the person ID and then showcase the first and last name of the authors. So if I copy and paste and hit run, would you look at that? It's made by me. That is true. I'm gonna be making green bean casserole this Thanksgiving. I make it every year for the past 3 years now. And so I know I want to make green bean casserole, but it's like I gotta go to the grocery store, but I don't know what I need. So the next query that I'm going to showcase is how to get the ingredients of a recipe. So in here, we're going to go ahead and get the amount, the unit, the ingredient, and then the prep method of each ingredient that belongs to a recipe with the name green bean casserole. Go ahead and copy, paste that. Go ahead and search. And look at that. When I go to the grocery store, I need to pick up cream and mushroom soup, milk, French fried onions, and green beans. And it also tells me unit two, so I need at least a cup and a half of milk, 2 cups of French fried onions, 4 cups of green beans, and 1 can of cream and mushroom soup. Alright, so now I have the ingredients, right? I go to the store, I buy all the ingredients, and then now it's time to cook it. So then what's the next step? Well, we gotta get the cooking steps. So in here, it's going to be a recursive function that finds that null value first with the same recipe ID of the name green bean casserole. And then from there, we're going to recursively look for the next steps until we can't find any more steps. And then once we get that, we're going to go ahead and get the step count. And then we're actually going to get the instructions from the cooking steps based on the ID. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this. And there we go. You got step one, step two, step three. Step one, heat the oven 350 Fahrenheit. We got step two, bake for 25 minutes or until hot and boiling. And then we also got our step three. So there's our steps to make our green bean casserole. And the next one is there's also a lot of family relations with the recipe book. So one family relation is maybe I want to know my ancestors. And so here it will look for myself, which I'm obviously number one in child ID because I put myself first in the database. And then after it finds me, it's gonna look for my parents, and then it's gonna recursively keep looking for my parents, of parents, of parents, so it gets my ancestors. And then I'm gonna go ahead and get the first names and last names and the ancestor count of each of my ancestors. So if I copy and paste this in here and hit play, we can see, okay, there's my father, my mother, my grandmother, my grandfather, and then my grandfather again on my mom's side, and then my grandmother. And then it also shows the ancestor count. So the first one's like the first level of the tree, so those are my parents, and then number two is the second level, which is my grandparents. And then next query is, let's say I want to try and get the family tree. So what this will do is this will find myself as a child, and then it's going to recursively call and look for the children of mine, the parents of mine, and then it'll recursively call whether my parents' child and then my parents' parents to try and develop the whole entire family tree. And then this four right here is how many recursive calls do we do of that? Four is enough to get about like 4 or 5 uh, edges away from me. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and get the first name of the child name and the last name. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this. When I go ahead and run this is my entire family tree. So there's me and then my dad and then me to my mom and then my sister to my dad and then my dad to my grandmother and then my dad to my grandfather and then my mom to my grandfather and then my mom to my grandmother and then my half sister to my mom and then my half sister to X and then my aunt to my grandmother, then my aunt to my grandfather, my uncle, grandmother, uncle, grandfather, and then my cousin to my aunt, and then my cousin to my aunt. And if you're to these, think of these are like all the nodes right here, and then this node points to this node, and that's one edge. And from here, you can make a family tree graph of my entire family. And then another one is if I want to know all my family relations, this will pretty much look for every family relation that is from me as I'm person ID number one. I put myself first to whoever it can find in the record, and then it'll look for a person and then go ahead and show me the relationship, the first name and the last name. So I'm gonna go copy, paste, and hit run. And this is my entire family with each relation. So we got my sister, father, mother, grandmother, grandfather, grandfather, grandmother, stepmother, half of a sister, three stepsisters, stepbrother, aunt, uncle, cousin, cousin. And then the last query to showcase is getting the count of recipes each of my family relations have made. So if I go ahead and copy this, what this will do is it will look for every family relation from me and then link it with the person ID and then go ahead and link the recipe to person from that person ID and then link the two recipe ID to the recipe ID. So it's just a bunch of linking together to go from the family relation to the actual recipe itself. So I go ahead and copy this, go ahead and paste in here, hit run. All right, here's my count. We have my father has 4 recipes. My grandmother has 4 recipes, which includes 2 grandmothers that I have because it's under grandmother. And then we have mother who has 1 recipe, and my stepmother has 8. She does. And that is my family recipe cookbook in a database SQLite with a bunch of different queries to get information. And that is our project.